Hello everyone, it's me Clayton. I just finished watching Malignant, which is directed by James Wan, the same director that did Saw, Insidious, and Aquaman, and starring Annabelle Wallis, who I mainly remember from the 2017 Mummy movie. So, James Wan is actually one of my favorite horror directors, as he's made a film that has inspired a major horror franchise with Saw, made another horror film that really happened to show me that jump scares can still work in the modern age with Insidious, and now with Malignant, he proves that even an idea that seems as silly as the one that's in this movie can actually be a pretty effective horror film. Let's get to the story, shall we? The story deals with a woman named Madison, played by Annabelle Wallis, who who has had strange visions and occurrences happen in her life, and when her abusive husband Derek, ends up getting killed in what seems like a breaking and entering case, the police find that there was absolutely no one who broke in, and they start to suspect that Madison herself was behind the killings. So Madison and her sister Sydney, well, her adopted sister, have to find out who's responsible for these killings, while we also find out the history of Madison and her imaginary friend named Gabriel. But that's all I'll say about the story without spoiling anything. The story here, like a lot of the really good horror films that rely heavily on its twist, generally gives you just enough information early on so that you can tell what things are going to be important and which things are not, but it happens to still surprise you when it comes to how the movie plays through its twist, even when it happens to set a lot of things up in its really gory and really intense opening sequence. Speaking of which, it also has a really good opening credits sequence that not only builds up the themes of the film, but it also just has really effective dramatic music that's used throughout that can seem overdone at times, but it still does establish the style of the film. I always felt that music and shocking, gory images were definitely part of James Wan's whole aesthetic when it comes to horror films. So you can definitely tell he's got his fingerprints all over this one. And even though Annabelle Wallis was basically perfunctory and kind of pointless even for Tom Cruise love interest standards in The Mummy, which is saying something, she actually gets to pull off a lot of dramatic moments here. And I really do appreciate her character and how she gets to come to the conclusions she gets to in the film, and especially during the final act. As for the main villain of the film, well, I won't reveal exactly who he is, but he's one of those creations that's ridiculously goofy, but also kind of horrific when you actually see him. In that he is basically superhuman, he can take out entire groups of people like it's nothing, and it almost feels like a horrific superhero film, like an R-rated version of Venom at times, which honestly works to this film's advantage when it comes to both who he's revealed to be and how he's connected to Madison. Also, the film doesn't. This film generally goes along at a pretty good pace, despite its 152-minute length. It definitely doesn't feel like it's 2 hours, is what I'm trying to say, even though it is. And all the stuff that you'd expect from a James Wan horror film, such as the cop procedural stuff, actually does work out. I mean, the cop characters here aren't exactly as memorable as, say, Detective David Tapp and Steven Singh from Saw, but they're still serviceable, and I did care for their side of the story as well as Madison's. I did think that this film was possibly in for a bit of a shock, considering that barely any critics got to go over it before it was released. But despite the fact that there was that review embargo, it actually turned out to be pretty good. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. See you next time.